In previous episodes, we discussed a Chinese woman stealing from the Paris National Museum of National History. Now, another scandal involving a person of Chinese descent has made international headlines. However, this time, it's not about stolen artifacts, but rather a carefully crafted identity fraud. According to Yale Daily News and Air Mail News, Yale University recently expelled a student who had been using the fake name Katerina Lin. The university accused her of orchestrating a detailed identity fraud, from a fabricated family background to forged transcripts. Everything was meticulously planned to secure her acceptance into Yale. The reports say that Lin grew up in a Chinese-American family in North Carolina, but to distance herself from her Chinese roots, she chose the Western name Katharina Lin. After some research, she picked Tioga, a remote town in North Dakota with only 2,000 people, as her false hometown. Not stopping there, she even created a backstory of overcoming poverty and loneliness in the small town, creating a narrative about self-reliance and academic success. As she said, "Basically, I had to rely on myself, doing a lot of reading and research because I didn't have help from counselors." To do this, Lin learned software like Adobe to create false transcripts and financial documents. She even wrote her own recommendation letters and figured out ways to bypass university security checks. She spent 2 years perfecting her fraudulent plan, refining every detail to ensure there were no holes. Finally, in late March 2025, her effort paid off. She received a thick envelope, the Yale University acceptance letter for the class of 2029, a dream come true. However, after being accepted, Lin's elaborate scam was quickly uncovered by her roommate. One of her roommates, Sarah Bashker, noticed that Lin had told different stories about where she was from: California, China, and Canada. On September 16th, Bashker spotted a luggage tag on Lin's desk with a strange name on it. That evening, while Lin was in the shower, Bashker secretly went through her room and checked her bag. Inside, she found Lin's IDs from a month earlier, showing a California address and the same name she had seen on the luggage tag. Bashker decided to show it to the college dean. When Dean Pericles Lewis found out, he revoked Lin's admission. In an email to Bashker, he said, "Lin has been dismissed from Yale College and will not be returning." Additionally, Yale spokesperson Paul McKinley issued a statement saying that Yale receives thousands of applications every year, and this process relies on the honesty of applicants and the accuracy of the information provided. However, if the university discovers that a student has misrepresented their background during the application process, the university will rescind their offer in accordance with admission policies. According to Fox News, on November 2nd, Adam Yuan, founder of Ivy Link and former admissions consultant at Columbia University, said, "As with any institution, whether it's elite universities like Columbia, Harvard, Yale, or workplaces, any employer, you'll see that if someone has the intent and the talent to do it, they can get through the screening process, whether it's faking your transcript, faking employment record, faking even testimonials from former employers or teachers, etc." Yuan also stated that the university admissions process is essentially trust but verify. Now, they use various software that conduct random checks, but in the end, it's not foolproof. He added that if Katerina Lin had put the effort she spent on creating a fake background into her studies, she might have been able to get into a top university on her own merit. The Lin incident may appear as just a student cheating scandal, but it has raised broader concerns. Lin's ethnic background, being of Chinese descent, is significant. This becomes more sensitive because any identity linked to Chinese heritage, culture, or potential connections can easily be magnified and interpreted as a possible risk signal. Fox News reports that while there's no evidence linking Lin to foreign governments, the scandal has sparked concerns about how to protect schools from bad actors. In fact, the public discussion surrounding the Lin case has gone beyond academia. On X, many users have linked this incident to Chinese espionage cases, arguing that when identity fraud and national ambiguity overlap, trust is almost non-existent. The Wall Street Journal commented that this case touched on two of the most sensitive nerves in American society: the crisis of trust in elite education systems and the complex emotions surrounding Chinese identity. The Heritage Foundation has also listed the Chinese Communist Party's influence in American education as a threat to all levels of academia, from kindergarten to elite universities. In 2024, the U.S. Department of Defense submitted to Congress its annual report, Military and Security Developments Involving the People's Republic of China, explicitly stating that military-civil fusion and overseas academic exchanges have become important pathways for China to acquire key technologies. The report revealed that Beijing uses national scholarships, talent programs, joint laboratories, and international collaboration projects to systematically incorporate students conducting research in the U.S. US or other countries into its military-civilian fusion efforts. The report particularly highlights that fields like artificial intelligence, quantum information, integrated circuits, deep space, and deep-sea engineering are key areas China is currently focusing on, and these are also hot research topics at top US and European universities. The Department of Defense pointed out that some students and researchers who came to the US appear as academics, but often have direct or indirect links to China's military and defense sectors. Beyond the warnings in the report, similar real cases have already occurred in the US, notably the Chinese Thousand Talents program, which offers high salaries to attract talent while simultaneously taking away technology. In November 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted 3 Chinese researchers from a Michigan university lab. They were accused of conspiring to smuggle genetically modified nematode biological materials from China to U.S. laboratories. The 3 held J-1 academic exchange visas and participated in research at U.S. university labs. Prosecutors indicated that from 2024 to 2025, they received multiple hidden biological material packages from China and attempted to bring them into U.S. academic labs. Although it's not explicitly stated whether the case is directly linked to military industries, it has been regarded by the Department of Justice and federal law enforcement as a serious event involving academic channels being used for external infiltration. In June 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice charged 2 Chinese researchers, Yunqing Jian, aged 33, and Zhongyong Liu, aged 34, who are working at a biology lab at the University of Michigan. They were charged with conspiracy, smuggling goods into the U.S., visa fraud, and making false statements. They were accused of conspiring to illegally bring a fungus sample, Fusarium graminarium, into the U.S. This fungus is known to cause head blight in crops like wheat, barley, and corn, and is considered a potential agricultural terrorism weapon. Prosecutors stated that in July 2024, Liu brought the fungus sample into the U.S. He and Jian discussed how to conduct experiments on it at their university lab. To evade customs inspection, they falsely labeled the sample as plastic cups. According to criminal complaints made by the FBI and the Department of Justice, both individuals held J-1 academic visas and were conducting biological research at the University of Michigan. Earlier, in May 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice charged a researcher and several students at the University of Florida with illegally sending biochemical samples and controlled toxins to China. The samples were originally part of a pharmacology research project at the university and were regulated by the Federal Select Agent Program. They were disguised as educational samples and sent via international courier. The students involved included a PhD candidate funded by the China Scholarship Council. Investigations revealed they had relabeled the samples in the lab and falsified documents to bypass export controls. The Department of Justice stated that this case reveals structural vulnerabilities in academic research systems between openness and security, and that the FBI considers it a typical example of academic channels being exploited for biological material transfer. After the case became public, the University of Florida suspended some international cooperation programs and was cited by the House Select Committee on the CCP as an example of educational security risks. According to a report by the American Association of Universities, as of 2024, over 150 U.S. universities still have active collaboration projects with Chinese universities or research institutions, some of which are on the U.S. Department of Commerce's Entity List. These collaborations involve sensitive fields like aerospace, semiconductors, and biotechnology. Chinese academic scholars have warned that this educational infiltration goes beyond just technology and science. Its deeper risk lies in its influence on the ideological domain. While the Thousand Talents program focuses on science and technology, China's long-term infiltration of global education systems targets the ideological and cultural areas. Under the guise of promoting language education, it plays a more covert political role. Since 2004, Confucius Institutes, established under the pretense of promoting Chinese language education and cultural exchange, have expanded rapidly in universities worldwide. By 2017, the U.S. had 103 Confucius Institutes. By 2020, under the pressure of congressional hearings and FBI investigations, Confucius Institutes were recognized as tools for Chinese communist influence in academia, with their curricula, funding sources, and staffing arrangements directly controlled by China's Ministry of Education. education. As investigations progressed, many U.S. universities began severing ties with Confucius Institutes. According to the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and BBC reports, by the end of 2023, more than 90% of the 103 Confucius Institutes originally in the U.S. had closed, with only a few continuing to operate under different names. In August 2020, the U.S. Department of State officially classified the Confucius Institute U.S. Center as a foreign mission, recognizing it as an arm of the Chinese government. However, even after these institutions began closing, China's activities didn't stop. Instead, they rebranded under new forms like China-US Cooperative Education Programs, Research Centers, and Talent Exchange Agreements. On the surface, Confucius Institutes focus on language teaching and cultural exchange, offering courses in Chinese, calligraphy, paper cutting, tea ceremony, and Tai Chi. These appear harmless. However, numerous reports from the U.S. Congress and academic institutions have pointed out that the content of their classes is clearly politically filtered and narrative-driven. Textbooks systematically avoid or omit topics related to China's political realities, such as the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident, the issues of Taiwan and Tibet, human rights in Xinjiang, and the religious freedoms of Falun Gong practitioners. Teachers are instructed not to discuss internal Chinese affairs and are encouraged to emphasize politically correct concepts like national unity and national rejuvenation. Many professors at partner institutions have found that the so-called Chinese culture promoted by Confucius Institutes has often been rebranded under the Chinese Communist Party's version. It's a cultural narrative that emphasizes stability, collectivity, and obedience, while silencing discourse on ideological diversity and social contradictions. At certain China-US joint research centers, funding agreements from China explicitly include clauses that prohibit actions detrimental to Chinese national interests. This means that even academic discussions within American campuses are subtly restricted by political red lines. If Confucius Institutes are responsible for spreading the narrative, then the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, CSSAs, ensures the correctness of the narrative. Through student organizations like the CSSA and campus Chinese language clubs, China establishes informal networks of public opinion to guide and monitor the behavior of Chinese students, providing ideological guidance and collecting intelligence. According to a 2022 FBI briefing, Chinese consular offices often use CCSAs to pressure international students, demanding that they express opinions or monitor the speech of others during sensitive events. This organization has branches at over 150 campuses in North America. Many Chinese international students have reported experiencing invisible pressure on their freedom of speech on U.S. campuses. For instance, some students were reported by classmates for criticizing the Chinese government in class, and even feared retribution upon returning to China. These cases raise questions. Is China attempting to build a network of extended control within the U.S.? In response to these alarming signals, U.S. universities and government departments have started adjusting their policies. Since 2024, the U.S. Department of State and the Department of Education have jointly launched the Campus Foreign Influence Reporting System, requiring universities receiving over $200,000 in foreign funding to disclose the sources of their funds and the backgrounds of their partners. Meanwhile, Congress has pushed for the Academic Transparency Act, which strengthens the regulation of Confucius Institute derivatives, including China-U.S. joint research centers and language partner programs. Prestigious universities like Harvard, MIT, and Stanford have updated their internal review systems to establish independent evaluation committees for foreign funding and collaboration projects. These measures, while seen as anti-infiltration efforts, have raised concerns among some professors, who believe the line between academic security and academic freedom is becoming increasingly blurred. Sociologists argue that China's infiltration of U.S. universities has not only existed for a long time, but is also escalating, with significant impacts on U.S. national security that can no longer be ignored. Scholars point out that the U.S. is known for its openness, and whether there are educational and academic exchanges, these are normal and should not be problematic. However, this does not mean that the U.S. should allow the Chinese Communist Party to infiltrate U.S. universities, especially with the aim of achieving its covert objectives. To protect U.S. national security, the government must take strong and decisive actions to cut off the CCP's influence, both visible and invisible, in American universities. As repeatedly emphasized in multiple congressional hearings, the stance of the U.S. political establishment is clear: welcome Chinese students, but reject the Chinese Communist Party's censorship and influence on campuses.